Hi there, everyone. My name is Jennifer Buorsi, and I'm one of the co-founders of Music for Your Inbox. And tonight we're having another artist chat with our male artist for this month, Camille Ora-Nicole, who is a visual artist, poet, but also a musician and filmmaker. So I'm going to get Camille started, and we'll chat with her about the piece this month. So I'm going to get that going. Welcome. It's so nice to see you.
Yeah, good to see you too.
So I was just kind of introducing this project that you're so graciously contributing your art to. So this month we're pairing a sound film, actually a trio of sound films by Nina Sernell with a brand new poem and drawing that Camille has created for us called Techno. And I'm just gonna right off the bat share what it looks like. It's this presented as this really beautiful postcard print, and there's just so much detail and some text in there. So, and on the back, you get a poem. So it's really beautiful. We're so grateful to get to present it and for you to join us for a couple about your practice tonight, if that's cool. Awesome. So
Yeah.
I thought it might be worth starting with, you're a really multidisciplinary artist. You work in poetry, visual art, film, photography, music. And we're lucky to present you as a poet and a visual artist, but I think this project is really perfect for you because you do work in so many ways that you can kind of respond and be really engaged. So you listen to Nina's music and looked at stills of their pieces, and like we're really able to kind of, I think, makes a lot of really interesting connections. And I know also a lot of our audience is people who are just creative in a ton of different ways. And it's not like a neat, oh, I do one thing very neatly. So I was wondering if you could talk about what it's like for you to work in these different ways, and like how do you see your different practices like crossing paths, or do they kind of stay separate for you?
Yeah, so I guess the first thing is I guess I'm multidisciplinary just because I like a lot of different things. And so like throughout like trying to figure out how to get across things that I want to get across, it's jumped mediums just kind of like out of necessity. Um, and sometimes it's really fun and exciting, and other times it's just stressful. But I think that's basically what art is. Like it's either a lot of fun or it's a little stressful, but ultimately like it's fine. Um, yeah, but sorry, can you say the second part again?
Yeah, so what I'm hearing is kind of like you will have like something you need to express, and then you're just looking for the medium that fits it best. Is that right?
Yeah, yeah, exactly.
Awesome. And how, so like where, as kind of as you kind of started in your art practice, where were you finding that you began, and how did things kind of spider out for you in other mediums?
So I started out actually writing. So I've been writing since I was very, very small. Um, and before I knew that writing was an art, I didn't really know that writing was an art until somewhere mid high school, actually. And by that point, I was getting ready to get to go to college. I ended up going for architecture. Really ended up liking drafting, and that's something that kind of really stuck from there all the way up till now. Um, and that transferred pretty easily into like the actual like drawing like I did for this project and like I do in general. It's not so much buildings, it's more so diagrams. I love diagrams. And then it must have been last year. I think it was last year or a couple of years ago where the writing and the drawing kind of just merged because ultimately I found that you could express what you're saying not only through the words but through that visual element as well, in an abstract way that has more to do with how it feels and less to do with it being like uh, a literal crossover between the two.
Yeah, so I mean, you like segued so beautifully into my next question because I wanted you to
Great.
talk about this like background in architecture, which is so fascinating, and like this interest in diagramming and diagrams. And I've seen you describe your work, some of your drawings as diagrams. Um, and so you talk about like creating relationships through drawings. And I wonder if maybe just as a way of understanding that, could you talk about like some of the relationships that you imagined in this piece? And if I need, if I can like say words too, because I know they're like microscopic on the camera. But how does that, like, how is that working, for example, in this piece, Techno Raiders?
In this piece, uh, so in this piece, I mean, it's about exclusion, right? Like it's a group of people thinking that everyone else wants to be where they're at, and a lot of people actually wanting to be where those people at, where the the Steve Jobs and whatnot, like that kind of heightened um, position. But
Mm-hmm.
it is very, very gatekeepy, and it's not even necessarily like they're not. I don't think any of them are good people,
Mm-hmm.
and I don't think I doubt that most people would actually want to work with them. But despite that, there is still that like barrier between them and everyone else. So in the piece, you do have like this shape here, and that is kind of like this is like the most uh, inward that you can get. This is like the farthest that anyone can go, and not a lot of people are going to get there. And you have like the other areas in that piece where there are more people, but as you see it going to that shape, the dots get fewer and fewer.
Mm-hmm.
Um, and ultimately, you see more people, dots, congregating around those like smaller shapes that are clumped together. And ultimately, that's like kind of like making community where you are, like getting into that first door and realizing, hey, this is as far as I need to go or that I want to go is right here. Maybe not that ultimate shape after all. They can kind of have it.
Yeah, I love getting to hear you talk about that. I'm gonna kind of point to things because I know you don't have like, so you're this kind of shape, is that like peak you're talking about? Is that right? Yeah, and on the top
Yeah.
it says techno capitalism. And then it's difficult to see in camera, but there are, oh yeah, it's definitely not going to do it. Focus on it, maybe. No. But there are all these dots. And I remember talking to you about the dots and like, and they're really, and you know, these idea of like shapes and gestures to architecture, because you are really thinking about like flow of flow in a space, whether it's dots or people by dots, and how gestures kind of shape flow. Is that right? Does
Yeah,
that sound right?
exactly. And I realized I like caught myself calling them people, but that's what the dots are. Yeah, it's
Right.
density
Yeah.
and yeah, just like movement.
Yeah. Well, so in kind of keeping that in mind, I'd love to like hear about the process of making this, because it's a kind of, there are a lot of pieces in this. There's the poem you wrote on the back, that's included, that we have on the back for people. There's the drawing, and then you sent us this really stunning behind the scenes video that people can check out on our feed that show you making this piece. And something that really surprised and was exciting for me to watch was how many kind of sketches you did before you landed on the shape. So can you talk about like what the process of creating kind of a like a flow or like a set of gestures like this, what that's like for you?
Yeah, so I mean, it definitely first comes from looking at the pieces that it's inspired from in the first place, and then writing the piece, and then from that piece, taking out the sections that I feel like work best in a visual element for the drawing, and then those pieces they help define how those shapes are going to be, and that part really is like kind of it's like making a room
Mm.
essentially. It's kind of like making a room, and there were a lot of those sketches, but that part is surprisingly kind of fast because you kind of like you have an idea, you try and figure it out, and then you go, okay, that piece works, that piece doesn't, and you just kind of keep going, and you can see that like in that process video too, where some of those shapes um, stay where they are or only change slightly from piece to piece, and then other shapes go away entirely. And that's the way I think about that is figuring out how to make this room function the best. Um, and sometimes it's just little tweaks to do that.
Yeah, I honestly, I had think I'd missed that detail, and I'm kind of excited to watch it again and notice what shapes like, stick or shift and all of this. And your primary material, because I remember we had some chats about like you draw in ink primarily, is that right? And you have like this a range of really like you had discovered like ultra wide pens, and you have a very fine. Is that right?
It is. I'm so excited. Like I don't know why I didn't know that giant ink things existed. And I hadn't thought about using brushes until you sent me an artist a while back who does some things like that too,
Yeah.
or does larger versions of what I do really. And I was just kind of like, that's amazing. Like I can also use just brushes. I bought some brushes. I haven't used them yet, but that'll
Yes,
happen.
cannot
Um,
wait.
but yeah, no, it's been an interesting process. I've always liked ink. I prefer ink. Me and graphite just really don't get along for some reason. It's always either been charcoal or ink or like chalk pastel.
Mm,
So those are really the only things I use, and ink is my favorite.
hmm. Well, watching you make, for some reason that really resonates. See, because the way you make the gestures, it doesn't feel like they could be like erased and redrawn. They are the shapes as you've like made them. Though you iterate in a kind of drafting way, like once they're kind of like drawn, for lack of they like live as that kind of shape in a way that doesn't feel like to me it would have the same sense of kind of fluidity and like those beautiful edges on the shapes if you had kind of like erased and cleaned and refined. So that makes a lot of sense to me. And I was also you described this process as kind of like I'm going to say pronounce this wrong. Ekphrastic poem, is that right? Did I say it right?
Yeah, yeah. Ekphrasis is what it's called, and then yeah, ekphrastic. Yeah, that's adjective. I don't know grammar, ironically. Yeah, that's correct. I think.
So what can you talk about what that is in kind of as a literary device and how you kind of modified it for this project?
Yeah. And I really hope I don't get this wrong.
People can
So
look it up later if they need to. It's
yeah.
fine.
So ekphrasis is a process where something is written based on a piece of art. And what I do is I create, yeah, no, that's what I do is the reverse of ekphrasis. So I'm looking at something that's written and drawing it out. And in this case, I guess it was both ekphrasis and reverse ekphrasis.
I love it.
Um, yeah, so it was both for this one, but generally I'll write. I said like earlier, I'll write something, take out those key pieces, and then draw and put those words inside it. So generally, lately it's been a reverse ekphrasis.
Hmm. Hmm. Beautiful. So there is like this really deep connection to like the written word as like this. It's really structural to things to have that written poem or is it ever a text longer than a poem or is it typically poetry for you?
Yeah, it's typically poetry. If anything, it gets shorter, not longer. So the shorter ones I've done have been like couplets. I've also gone shorter than that and just been like, here are words. Like in fact, when it first started, it really was just like, here are some words. I'm gonna put these words on this drawing. And I think like, because there was one that I did for Midnight Mass that had to be like last year, um, and I called it like a cloud map or something. But I drew the thing, and then it started with Midnight Mass, and then each section or each little area that I had drawn had a different like word, but they all relatively connected to midnight mass. So if anything, yeah, it's only gone from like single words to poetry. I highly doubt it'll go uh, past that. I'm not much of a short story writer or a long format writer really at all.
Yeah. Yeah. And you know, because of this, like you had this reverse ekphrastic, I'm gonna say it so wrong every time, or ekphrasis, and then like actual ekphrasis, because you were responding to these film stills and this like music and film. Like as a musician and filmmaker yourself, what was it like to kind of to like have that be part of your process to respond?
It was fun. I think it's definitely something I'd want to do again with other things. Sometimes I think about like doing movie reviews or like just doing reviews even just for study or whatnot. And then it gets time to do it and I'm like, I don't want to. Um, but I think doing it this way where I'm watching something and reviewing it and then writing about it in a creative way and like I think like this was a really interesting practice because it's something that I can see myself doing and actually enjoying and while still like learning what I need to learn from whatever it is that I'm watching.
Mm-hmm. That's a really so there's kind of two things happening at once because on the one hand you're responding, but there's also a kind of like it's a way of you synthesizing and understanding the work too. Is that how you feel about it?
Yeah, yeah, definitely. What I didn't mention is so for the drawing, for the actual drawing with before words were put to them or anything, um, when I started really getting into like stippling and figuring out like style and whatnot, that was during grad school. Um, I had switched from design to, well, I was still doing design, but I was doing preservation. So there was a lot of reading and a lot of writing, which before then had been fine, I guess. Like in high school, like I did fine, I guess. But after going for several years where all I did was design, going back into like reading and writing, and not only reading and writing, but doing it at a higher level than I had ever done because you don't really read and write when you're in like lab.
Mm-hmm.
Um, it was it was an interesting shift that was kind of hard sometimes, and sometimes it was really hard for me to focus. So in class, I would actually literally have a notebook, and sometimes I pull out a triangle and a ruler too, and just like sit there and draw the entire time. Like I didn't take notes really. I didn't barely look up half the time. I would literally sit there and draw, and it helped a lot because it made it so that I had something to focus on while also like doing this thing. Um, and ultimately, my professors didn't care. They thought it was amusing. um, but I don't think without doing that that I would have done as well as I did if I had like tried to force myself to sit there and like I don't know do what students are supposed to do for 2 hours.
Right. That kind of like what is it, that kind of note taking where you're like number one, section A, whatever, horrible kind
Yeah.
of. Well, and it's really fascinating to hear that that was like, you know, an experience for you because I do think that something about your work, and I hope this like sounds as elevated as I feel like it is, but like there is an aspect of your work that feels like it has its roots in doodling, and maybe it's that like sense of gesture and like you commit to it. It's not um like you straddle this beautiful line between something that feels like totally free and improvised and also really detailed and precise. And I feel like that's something I've experienced with like doodling before, and the way you've kind of elevated these gestures and these shapes and this kind of sensibility of diagrams. um, it's really interesting to hear that kind of that way that you were synthesizing information through like drawing while you listened, and how it's like mapped its way into this really really interesting kind of way of understanding relationships. Um, and that kind of brings me to the last thing I wanted to talk about is that, like, to me, you're an artist who thinks a lot about relationships, like the way you're moving between different mediums, like seeking the medium that like will meet your needs, and the way you're drawing these like connections. Um, and then just like the at the basic level of like, like illustrating relationships also. Um, and my sense is that you also like really think about like how people, and in particular like creatives and artists, um, form relationships and communities for thriving. Like even when you're talking about your dots on this drawing, you were thinking about like where people situate themselves to like create a sense of community and thriving. And so I wanted to talk about this project that you co-founded called the Queer 26, which now you're the board president for, which is this really cool uh, arts nonprofit. I'm going to read the description of it if you don't mind. So, the Queer 26 is a media arts nonprofit supporting QT creatives through our workshops, events, and media projects. We help our communities thrive while pursuing their dreams. Um, and I'm always like super into artists who are like practicing and then also organizing and like making stuff happen for people. So I was wondering, like, can you talk about why you co-founded the Queer 26, and what it's been like to be like both an artist and a community maker in that way?
Yeah. So I made it, or I when we were first founding, oh gosh, finding it. We were first finding it.
Yeah.
Um, yeah. It was pretty soon after undergrad, so it was like in between undergrad and in grad school, and I had a very, very strong community at the Pride Center at my undergrad, like very strong to the point where actually a lot of the people that I went to school with who were part of that center, like we're still connected in different ways and whatnot. And it was really impactful. It was really influential. I did like leadership stuff through there. Kind of found my footing there and everything. And then I left because I graduated, and that had been in Pomona. I came back home, basically back to LA, and like South Bay areas roughly. And I found it kind of hard to figure out where to go to find community, because Los Angeles, and I say this a lot, but Los Angeles is very large. There are a lot of queer creatives of color like all throughout Los Angeles County, but the problem is that we're so spread out, and there isn't often like resources that are like focused specifically on us, or if they are, they're they somehow they make it hard to find anyway. So it's a little tricky. And I consider myself lucky that I ended up like emailing the right person who happened to be like somewhere in the epicenter of like um, queer community of color. But I don't want it to be, or I didn't want it to be that way for everyone else. I wanted it to be easier for people to find each other, and to work together and to learn about each other. And so it kind of started to grow out of that, like where we created like resources, like these are some definitions you should know. And then it went from that to the magazine that we had that where we interviewed different people throughout the community who were either like just starting out or kind of mid range in their careers. And then from there, it just turned into, okay, how do we make more media? How do we support more people who are doing media? How do we meet the people that we need to meet to do things, like do cool things that we want to do? Um, and it's really just grown a lot since then. And it's been humble. I'll say that it's been humbling. It's been a bit of imposter syndrome, if I'm being completely honest on my
Yeah.
end. It's been a lot of. It's also pushed me to learn more and to explore more and get into different like media type. So like for instance, the filmmaking, like that's something that I was interested in for sure, like before, or just before and during making Q20 or creating Q26, but it wasn't something that I knew a lot about. And then suddenly we were doing more with filmmaking, and I was like, oh, I don't know anything. So, oh no, I need to learn things. But it's pushed me to learn things, and I've learned so much from meeting other people in the community and from doing these projects. And it's been amazing to have these projects and have them available now where other people who are interested in filmmaking and in other things are able to work with us and learn more and get their hands dirty, like do it by doing, or learning by doing. And it's been kind of amazing being able to turn back now and be like, okay, I know where you're at and I know how to help you. Um, and now that you know this thing, we could do something together later on too. Like it's a very cool like cycle, and it's something that we all need. Like we all need people who can help us move forward. We all need people who can help us do this because we can't do it alone. We can't do it in a vacuum. That's not how things work unless it's like truly like an individual research thing, or if it's me making a million dots on a piece of paper. But if you're doing something like very large and something that's multidisciplinary, generally you need people to do that. So that's what Q26 is. That's what we strive to continue to be, and we have things coming up this upcoming year that's gonna allow us to do that on an even larger scale. So that's really exciting.
Well, yeah, that's really neat. And does it, is it one of, I'm like hearing that like there's a bit of a feedback loop with your own practice too, where like you get to, you know, use your skills to help other people and develop your own skills. And that's part of the positive cycle of things.
Oh
Is
yeah,
it
absolutely.
awesome?
Yeah.
Awesome. Well, thank you so much for chatting with me. I'm gonna hold up a piece again because I love it so much. I mean, this Instagram video does not do it justice. Y'all need to like get a ticket, get it at home. The detail is stunning. And then you also get to enjoy the poem on the back. Techno Raiders, and it's paired with sound films by Nina Sarnell. So it's this really cool curation that um, kind of criticizes the air we're like currently swimming in here on Instagram too. So we're really grateful to y'all. And is there anything else you wanted to add before we signed off for the night?
Um, I think that's pretty much it. I mean, other than I'm working on some more pieces. Hopefully they get done this winter.
Yes.
But hopefully I'll have more things to share before the new year, and then some larger pieces definitely next year. So excited about that.
Awesome. Yeah, I'm excited too because I love seeing all of your work. So thanks for making more stuff. All right, well, thanks for chatting, and yeah, we'll be in touch. And happy holidays, happy art making over the break.
Thank you. You too. Happy holidays.
Bye.